stream doesn't work.
And we're live.
Still, okay.
Okay,
Or we're recording.
we're recording. Okay, so everybody should have a handout. I've got a couple, but the main one is, which you emailed, I think, most of this ahead of time. And I guess we'll just walk through that, if that's okay, the way we usually do with the PowerPoint. But this will be a lot more, I think, inviting. So anyway, if you look at the agenda, we're going to continue the housing and neighborhoods discussion. There's the revised recommendations. I also have the assessor's data on housing types, because the question was, do manufactured homes or mobile homes really exist in the village? And the answer is no, according to the assessor. Also, a follow-up on the missing middle housing discussion we'd started. And also, I'd like to just share some thoughts about public engagement, because we had started a discussion about, all right, what's the right way to get the public involved in discussion of projects. And I've been, I hate to say this, but it's sort of like I've been agonizing over that, because it's a complex question, and I have some thoughts, but I'm open to others. Then I put together some information about where we stand in terms of climate smart communities in the comprehensive plan. And then, the next thing will be setting up our next meeting date. So, I guess the first thing, if you just go to page 2, that's the data that shows the different housing types. Now, of course, I was I thought this was pretty great, because it would be a way of checking the census American Community Survey numbers. But it turns out these are compiled differently. For example, if there's a 3-family residence in the assessor's count, that's one site. In the census, that's 3. So they don't jive. But we do know, because the question was there manufactured housing or mobile homes in the village? And the answer is, according to the assessor, no, there are none.
And on the assessor data, because not all of them share the number of units, but it does show you how many recycle bins are there.
Oh, okay.
And so that's what I have. I was like, oh well, there we have a proxy for the number of units.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So is anybody willing to?
I looked at the apartment complexes.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Any other thoughts, reactions about this data? So, the bottom line is we're going to continue with the Census American Community Survey and ESRI estimates, because, not perfect, but good enough for planning purposes. The next, if you go to page 3, this is the revised housing and neighborhoods recommendations. This I didn't highlight this one. There is. One was on page 3, the fourth objective under the safeguard the quality of residential experience was to regularly monitor the status of the village's subsidized senior housing and, as appropriate, revise its zoning to allow redevelopment to other uses. So we added that.
I have a quick question about the traditional neighborhood design.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? Like, what are the fundamental features of
Well,
traditional
it's actually,
neighborhood design?
it's the standard walkable community.
Okay.
And
That's what I wanted to make sure, yeah.
yeah, and it's in the zoning. There are traditional neighborhood design guidelines in your zoning now for that district. So the idea is to start thinking maybe those in more, using them in a wider context. And in the recommendation talks about using those, and possibly in other areas, to use them as voluntary guidelines. Depending on how heavy-handed, if that's the right word, the village wants to be with regulation, or how severe the need is, to use examples from other communities, to ensure that there is a high-quality built environment. Sometimes they can be mandated, but other times it can be just, here's what we're looking for. And, in the right development climate, that's the beginning of discussion, and you even get more creative ideas because the developer would say, all right, I got it, let me get back to you with how we do this. So that's the thought on that. The other recommendation that's at the heart of this is the missing middle recommendation, which we spent some time talking about. I sent you some materials about that, and I brought that. It's from the National Association of Home Builders, just describing how to get to the missing middle formula by using form-based codes. And the idea behind that is what you try to do is, rather than regulate density, you regulate basically what the structure looks like and how it's oriented, so it looks like and is designed like the stuff that's around it in the village. I mean, and so that you can, for example, do multi-unit structures that look like single-family structures in the community, or you can do what are they called? Tiny houses, that as long as they're consistent with the form-based code, that would be allowed in a residential district. So the good news in all of this is it's a way of getting at being more flexible in terms of the different range of housing types that you have available without having to compromise the quality of the built environment. So that's the great news. The bad news is form-based codes have been around 20 some odd years, more than that now. And I keep waiting for them to get easier to understand. This is, I've brought these for folks to look at. This is the form-based code for Canton, Connecticut, which is it's a smaller town. Some of the others are like Buffalo has form-based code. And I think it's a worthwhile objective to look at, but in terms of putting together a code that can actually be administered, I don't know. I have my doubts. There are these tables that refer to other tables, that refer to diagrams. So it's considered sort of the cutting edge of new urbanism and all that kind of stuff. And this whole missing middle housing movement is built around the idea of using form-based code to create a variety of housing types that conform to the form of the village.
Okay. Can I ask a question
Sure.
for you, Peter? So I'm looking at the assessor's data. 70% are single-family residences, thereabouts, right? So the concept of missing middle, right? I mean, the word missing implies that we are deficient of something, right? Which kind of, to me, implies a problem. Is
Right.
there a problem that we have by not having
Yeah, why?
less single-family residences?
I'll pose it, and you guys tell me if it's a problem. Because the problem it's designed to solve is the affordability question.
Okay.
And when we looked at the analysis, it does look like there's some issues related to affordability
There are.
in the village. So, rather than having to build cheaper versions of single-family houses as a way to try to solve the problem, because there may be a mismatch between people not wanting single-family housing, and that's all that's available. If you have flexibility where you can do multifamily housing, that in some cases looks like a single-family house.
That look that they fit in with different entrances and.
Right.
So it's increasing the density, but trying to stay more to the character, which, again, I saw some of the recommendations, we don't have that captured really anywhere. There are some suggestions in the architectural review board, there's some suggestions for the planning board, right, like buffers and
Right.
setbacks are code, right, but buffers and trees and berms and
Yeah.
all that stuff, but
This is
they're all
different than
different
that.
places.
Yeah, and again, one of the recommendations is separate from all of this, is to bring all that into a separate place in the code. Because there's a lot of good work there, and again, there's a culture of doing it right in Warwick. So the extent to which we can institutionalize that by getting all of that separate so people can see it easily. But the form-based code thing applied to missing middle is a little different. Because what you're doing is that you're not just looking at one thing, or, it's not just setbacks, it's not just, minimum lot coverage. You're looking at all of those things in the context of each of the neighborhoods. There was, and it's funny, the folks that designed Warwick Grove, Dwayne Zybert, this is their baby. They're the ones that thought this up. it's their fault. But because, I mean, in some ways, it's a great concept, but administratively, it just seems to me, it's difficult. Like, if you get this and you're on board with it and you want it to happen, it can happen. But if you've got a board or an applicant for whom this is something new, I think trying to do that through something like this could prove to be a challenge. And my suggestion isn't not to do this eventually, but this may not be the first thing.
So what is the implication that, you know, if we agree that this is a problem, right, to solve some of the affordability issues, is it suggesting to change our code in some meaningful way?
Yeah, and like, for example,
Or
one,
allow more multifamily and otherwise kind of what would be zoned as single family?
Right.
Allow more multifamily as long as they adhere to this kind of, what do you call it?
right.
Forms.
See, the simpler way to do that is, all right, just allow more multifamily in the context of design guidelines. And, you know, that becomes a little different then, because then you're working with fixed parking requirements, lot coverage, and all that sort of stuff. What this tries to do is to give the developer maximum flexibility to produce something that meets the market need, affordable housing, but still looks or is consistent with the character of the community.
So it could be mixed in like wherever.
Yes, like any residential,
Any residential area
Okay.
could have any mix of these things as long as they adhere to the code, the form-based
Yeah, so do
code.
you think that would apply to a single-family residence to convert it into a duplex? Because right now you need a variance and that's not trivial.
right.
Yeah.
right?
Well-
Yeah, have you seen that also apply to conversions? Or are you
The
talking new
form-based
construction?
code, no. No, I've seen it in the context of new construction.
Okay,
But because the alternative is to allow variances for multifamily in a single-family residence.
that's a separate kind of thing.
Why
yeah.
wouldn't you do it for a conversion?
Well, if they're not changing the footprint of the building at all, and it's an old building that's hit,
And it adheres to the form,
yeah, then all they need to do is put another door in and close off
do the
you
improvements
Yeah.
interior.
Yeah, so again, minimal development left here, right? I saw in the note here that it maybe would apply more towards annexed
Right.
parcels, right?
Redevelopment.
I mean, Bo, I'd love to get your perspective.
Well, I think we've identified some parcels in the village that exist today that could maybe have this work in, but they're not really that large, right? So it does come down to annexation and what kind of parcels we're looking at bringing in potentially down the road. Kind of identifying them and saying this is where that could work, I guess, because without bringing in bigger parcels, I don't know how you really implement this type of development, right? I mean,
Right.
you could raise buildings and do things like that, but you can't, or put second, third stories on, but there's just not that square footage acreage wise to
So-
do planned development.
So it sounds like, I mean, if we think about why we're here for the comprehensive plan, right? It sounds like it makes sense to incorporate that verbiage in the comprehensive plan, but nothing, it sounds like that we need to act upon in the near term. I mean, this is, just because we're putting it in the plan doesn't mean
Right,
we're necessarily gonna act upon it, but it captures the vision
right.
that
And
should that need arise, we'll say, well, we have this kind of beacon here to guide us.
Well, it says adopt policies to encourage missing middle housing, particularly for lands annexed. And then it just describes what they are. One way to achieve that is to,
right.
so
Yeah, so
it's pretty flexible right now.
It doesn't commit the village to form-based codes. I didn't want to do that.
No.
But it's a tool. It's saying, we need to address the missing middle, and form-based codes may be one way to do it. Judicious use of variances with design guidelines could be another.
Yeah, because it's all good to put in future-looking, items in the comprehensive plan, but next time we go to revise the plan, it's almost a scorecard of sorts. Did we even, I look back at the one from 2004, there's a bunch of stuff we didn't even get close to addressing.
Yeah,
Right, so it kind of looks like, okay, well, do we want that again, and the next one, so, I don't know.
This one includes street sections as well.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah, that's,
is good, yeah.
yeah,
Because, I mean, we have a real need, we have a real need to adapt our streets for walkability and,
yeah, and we've reflected that in the,
Yeah.
the
Yeah, that's-
transportation, parks and parking recommendations. But again, this is kind of the tool, excuse me, that's getting more attention about ways to do this.
well, and, I mean, it seems like maybe part of the reason this is so long, this gets into architectural, this is compiling a lot of things that exist in different parts of the code.
Yes, but the trickiest thing is it does that tying. What it attempts to do is to tie the different regulations to different types of spaces or neighborhoods. The whole idea of what's called transect planning, which is what this is derived from, is that there's high density neighborhoods that require, and mixed use neighborhoods that require a certain set of standards that are different in the more residential setting. But as long as you can conform to that difference, let's say lower density, but still, close orientation to the sidewalk, entrance transitions, whatever, then you could do something like multifamily housing as long as it looked like. The recommendation is to consider it, not to do
I'm
something.
okay with how it's written, I
Okay.
look at this as for annexations, which isn't really even on the table at the moment.
Yeah,
Unless it's also applying to conversion, which is a separate story, but I'm okay with
I
that.
guess there are other properties available. Is the one where the old Pioneer was, where the double S, Jonah's property, that's in the village now, right? That was annexed in.
10 acres.
So that 10 acres could be developed more densely and mixed use, if you will, I guess, of apartments and
Well-
smaller houses. I mean, that's certainly more affordable if you build a 1,500 square foot house compared to a 7,000 square foot house.
yeah, yeah.
But,
And
Yeah.
redevelopment, right? Like that part, that like weird giant, the rubber factory or whatever it is.
Mechanical.
mechanical rubber, right?
Yeah.
Yes, if that was knocked down and redeveloped, yeah. That could be a spot too. That's only about 3 acres though, I think, so it gets a little tighter. I don't know what the,
Yeah, there's
Is
some really cute
smallest-
examples of like attached single family. in here.
And is mechanical rubber the parcel that's not in the village?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
yeah.
not, oh,
Yeah, it's a little island of
So, yeah,
town.
it's gotta be annexed, right? At some point, I'm assuming that'll happen though, because, I mean, does it?
Certain,
Mine is,
Yeah.
certainly if, they want to develop it
Right.
in a way that's different from what exists there now.
Yeah, yeah, just based on it being an island, it seems silly down the road when it is changed over to keep it in the town.
Yeah.
I would think, be better off in the village, but it's a small piece.
Yeah, and it got landlocked by the, I guess by Burt Farms and Creekside.
Is that?
Coming around it, yeah,
Yeah, okay.
because that all got, annexed
Yeah.
Right, right, okay,
quite a long time ago.
yeah.
So anyway, those are the
there it is.
major changes.
Those would be cute there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's 2 other copies of that, the whole shebang.
You wanna see
Yeah.
one? Anything else?
Page
You guys wanna see these? Or if you want 'em.
Then also at the bottom of page 4, there are some new recommendations, or a new recommendation for resilience and sustainability. Jack and I had a conversation about sewer and water infrastructure and making sure that it's meets the needs of the village. And so the goal would be ensure that the infrastructure can accommodate future demand without diminishing quality of service. Objectives: 1, continue to seek funding to improve sewer and water infrastructure throughout the village. And objective 2, implement a capital improvement planning process for the sewer and water system. And generally, that's like a 10-year capital plan where you revisit it every year, but you've got 10 years of projects prioritized.
Well, I think the village residents certainly think that that's a priority. I agree. Getting done.
Because there's a lot of projects in the pipeline, but it's a matter of, I think Carly, you and Barry were talking about, it's more formalizing that into a plan.
Yeah,
And communicating that.
yeah, the idea is.
There are a list of projects.
Sure there are.
But a lot of it has to do with the funding available at
Yeah.
each point in time.
Yeah, so the idea behind this is just simply to create a priority list.
Right.
And so as funding becomes available, it's, try to get this one funded first.
Yep.
It's just a way of organizing the process.
Maybe making it publicly available.
Prioritize the objectives, right? I mean, as far as, and then maybe even set a date, if you could try to start a date or end date, we want to get this accomplished by this date.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you basically punch it into the fiscal year you would expect to actually do it.
Right, right.
And then those things tend to move.
Yeah, it's funny how that happens.
Based on availability of funding primarily, and then also the critical nature of the need.
Well, the emphasis at the federal level on infrastructure improvements in terms of what's been passed or proposed to be passed in terms of legislation. I mean, that hopefully would be trickling down to the municipalities in order to accomplish
Yep.
that.
Let's see.
Hopefully,
Yeah.
depends on who it trickles to.
Yeah, who gets it first?
I know.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we've made it a point over the past 5 years to try and get shovel-ready projects. So that if the feds come in and say, oh, we need, here's a bunch of money, but the economy needs this to be spent in the next 18 months. Now, we're not gonna need to spend a year or 10 months to design something that,
Right.
that then doesn't have enough time to get built to get it done in the 18 months.
Yep.
So some of the priorities could be around designing the different systems so that they are
Right.
shovel-ready, at least in terms of how you allocate capital.
Or replacing systems that are in need of replacement,
Right.
that
Right.
are already there.
That's considered a project that some of the water tanks would look at.
Yep. So those will be added without any, unless there's some objection.
That's great.
The other thing I wanted to get to, which is 2 pages down, is to continue the discussion about the public review of development projects. Yeah, it's on, there's a little outline following the page that's there about the form-based code. And again, I've been running scenarios in my head for the last month about, all right, how would this work? And what makes it work and what causes problems. And here, I have the 3 thoughts here. In some ways, the most productive focus for public input is on the comprehensive plan rather than individual projects. Because what you want is a buy-in to, this is what we want to be like. Because that gives you a much better sense of the sort of the future direction without getting into some of the dynamics associated with kind of NIMBY responses. And one of the things that's really frustrating when you have public review is that, let's say you're reviewing something for a new commercial development that's in a commercial zone, and people show up saying, we don't want commercial development there. Well, every public expression about development preferences that are in the books right now suggest it should be, and needs to be commercial development.
So you may be suggesting that when we have more of a draft of the plan, to have a public engagement session where we essentially present the draft as it is and solicit feedback.
Yeah, and
It's
to
a late stage input gathering, but
well, the thing is, 2 things. I mean, because we've been going sort of topic by topic all along. But now when you get to the draft, I think it's a good time to take a step back and everybody look at the whole.
Yeah.
And 2, people tend not to react until they see the whole thing. It's when they see the actual draft, and they have 2 responses. 1, how come nobody told me? And then 2, whatever their concerns are. So I think that would.
Kind of NIMBY on a broader scale.
Yeah. But see, the other thing I think that's important is then to continue that process on an annual basis. Like in the plan, there's recommendations for the boards to come together just, for kind of like a retreat. And it seems to me, and what I'm suggesting here is a portion of that agenda should always focus on how are we doing with the master plan? You know, do the principles still hold? Is it still a good guide for us? And it's a way of keeping the boards aware of that. It's also a way indirectly of making sure the public is aware that this is an important thing that we need to make sure is working for us.
Does the board's retreat include sort of a public engagement element, like a listening session?
It hasn't yet. It's not been defined. It's really kind of the
Just sort
boards
of-
should be defining that, not the consultant. I mean, I could put you guys through all kinds of hoops. But you know, that may be a part of it. But also, what I've done here is to start to put together. Could you do a really short summary of what the meaning of this plan is? And there is in the handout here. There's the plan vision, and then there's another page which is under this plan. What will future growth look like?
This is helpful because I was immediately like, no. Having pictures, you know, because I
Yeah.
was like, this is too much concrete. This is way too much concrete. Like, you know,
But you know about these, because these are just out of street view. I did them like
Yeah.
3 nights ago. But they're actually existing projects that reflect the statements there. Development of vacant or underused parcels in the village with new development designed to blend into their surroundings.
Pass me that other one if I didn't have the whole.
This one?
Yeah, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is new. Yeah, Jack, this was added. So the idea is to characterize, and I think these 3 statements capture a lot of what the development that's anticipated in the comprehensive plan is going to involve. Underused parcels with new development, redevelopment or replacement of existing buildings, annexation of properties into the village.
yeah.
And, you know, it talks about, all right, this is how the plan suggests you treat each of those. And I think it would be helpful to have, if this is a direction people want to go, to have images that really capture that. And again, this was my attempt to do that, just using Google Streets and saying, all right, what are things that suggest that? And the idea would be if we can get this together so it's like a 2-pager, just mail it out to everybody. You know, that says, this is the vision for the plan, this is what it's going to involve. These are the things that are likely to come out of it. So it becomes a lot easier. Well, it's a lot easier to respond to it. It's also a lot harder to ignore it because it says, this is the choice you're making. And I think that's an important thing for the comprehensive plan to do for the community.
Yeah, and it
It's-
provides a visual, I think the visual piece is really important. Because what does it mean for it to blend into its
Right.
surroundings? Because there are some elements of the surroundings that we want to carry forward and some that we want to change.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so, maybe it would be blend into their surroundings and maximize walkability and
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
green space.
Yeah,
Because
'cause-
in some cases it has the right architecture but doesn't have these other elements of
Mm-hmm.
the comp plan.
Yeah, and that's the other things that, maybe even a separate bullet on the whole idea of walkability and that sort of thing. But, short, just here's, to really try to boil it down and say, this is what we're talking about. This is the thing. This is what it means. And are you okay with that? And even if this isn't a perfect capture of it, it's still, then it brings people into the discussion to say, well, I don't like it because there's not enough landscaping or whatever. And okay, but we're going to try to address that when we get to the zoning and design guidelines.
There could be a little quick survey that goes out with it.
Yeah. Yeah, what do you think? And again, this is not instead of the comprehensive plan, but this is, this is almost like the preface is, this is why we've done this. This is what it means for the future of the village.
Yeah.
Are you suggesting a mailer to everyone?
Something, yeah, that's one way to do that. And, it could also.
With what content? I mean,
With some variation on this, just sort of, this is what the plan envisions, and this is the implications of that vision.
I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
love that because it's such a small part of the overall plan. People start thinking about, they look at the street, they look at the sidewalk, they look at, it conjures all these thoughts and emotions, and it just,
Okay.
my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's good, because this goes back to that discussion of, all right, how do we do public engagement in terms of development projects?
But the vision is the plan, right? Like the vision, that is really important for people to be aligned on. Because all the, that's the light in the distance that we make all of our decisions to be in alignment with.
Agree, but if we're distilling it down into something that's more easily consumable, because it's, kind of a narrow view of the information, we have to be judicious with how we select what that is, right?
Right.
Maybe it's a drawing of the intersection we're gonna change later in the year. Maybe it's,
Example of how this, so more examples than just like buildings.
right, yeah, the buildings, cause then there's the whole, don't tell me how to build my, my project. And plus, one thing that I think we've seen recently in the community is that there is that tension between development and preservation of green space, right? So when you talk about development, just alone showing buildings, say, hey, this is what's coming, people think, whoa, this place is getting too built out, right? But in reality, there's not many more places to build. I just think it's drawing focus to the wrong thing, in my opinion.
What if we do, because this vision, this is the vision statement I think that we're talking about,
Right.
and then maybe what is being debated right now is this. What if we use this as like, are we gonna have like we're gonna have a final public hearing to talk about the results of the plan and like unveil it?
Yeah,
And
at the
get
draft.
any final, because maybe that's a way to get people to come to, or look at it and comment on the plan, and it's, all its draft glory.
But I mean, also, and I don't think we have to resolve this tonight, but I think it would be helpful, as I've seen plans and how they're used, to have a preface that makes it really clear, this is what this plan is about. Because it's so easy, like the existing plan, which was done in 2004, I think there's a lot of good stuff in there, but when you say, all right, well, what was this plan about for the village? It's hard to distill that. And I think it would
It's an
be,
executive summary.
but even shorter than that, because, I write 4-page executive summaries, and I'm thinking 2 pages, or like 1 page, and then just some graphics to say, this is what it means.
Well, you could have a picture of each element, like what it means for each element, for housing, for.
Yeah, possibly, but just to circle around, what I'm trying to do is there a way we can elicit people's comments about what they want development to look like?
Didn't we do that in the initial scoping sheets that you guys had put out to we had?
The survey, you mean?
Yeah.
Survey, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was pretty much out to the public and commented with, a handful of different ideas and thoughts from a wide range of folks. I don't know how many were actually surveyed, how many, I don't recall.
Yeah, the surveys,
The amount of people that responded, because typically, in my opinion, I would say that it's usually light in the amount of public that actually comes out and participates in something like that, and even lighter if it's not in their backyard.
Right.
It's being done. So again, it's like waving the flag to come,
yeah, and the thing
There's
is,
definitely some.
Village only was 572, the town
Yeah.
was.
Yeah,
It's
so
like
you're
800.
talking minimum, I mean, even with the elections, you're talking minimum public participation. Not that it shouldn't be, I'm not saying that, I'm just saying,
That's
it
reality.
seems like we're, trying to bring people to fight against it, from my seat. And I know you're not saying that, but that's what it feels like.
I agree.
And when you say like, don't tell me how to develop it, well, if you're going by the code, that's what it's all about. So
Right.
we can ask the public what they feel about that all we want, and they should participate. Again, the simplest form, they have notice, initially when an applicant is put on the agenda, right? So the first day somebody comes up to an applicant comes to the planning board, the public has notice. if they choose to look at the website and look at the information. Do they come out? I mean, an example would be, is it Village View or Valley View? I don't even know
Village
which
View.
one.
Village View.
Village View that
Yeah.
got so much, pushback. I mean, there was 2 people here at the other meeting, at the last meeting, about that.
Yep.
Now, maybe the rest aren't coming because nothing's really happening, but, I mean, 2 people out of that whole group are now
Yeah.
kind of pushing back. So I don't know, feelings fade at some point.
Yeah,
Um,
people get exhausted,
and-
or
yeah.
they feel heard. That's,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the other,
That's the other, yeah, because I think even if people do not come out in droves, that doesn't absolve us from our responsibility to do the due diligence. And I think and perspectives change once the rubber meets the road. So there's there's a 2 touch point that is really important when you're doing engagement. Like, we ask you questions, you give us responses, this is what we did with the information that you gave us, did we get it right?
Right.
And that's important in terms of building trust with the local government too.
Sure.
Even if people may not show up, but if they know that it happened, and then they also can show the math on the decisions that were made, show the math in terms of like, this is the process that we went through, and we went back out, and et cetera.
Right.
Then all of that, even just existing,
Sure.
is an important like trust builder.
well, let me give you an example from another project in a slightly different field of what I'm trying to get at with this. Is I did for, 20 some odd years, the economic development strategies for Ontario County near Rochester. And there was the central focus of that was to really position the county to do high-end technology-oriented economic development, not just to take anything, but that it had to be that. The IDA, the board that was responsible for that, absorbed that message. So that a developer came through who was building a pipeline, from I think Lake Ontario to Point South in Pennsylvania, and along the way was just going to all the IDAs and getting funding for the project. He makes the standard presentation to the Ontario County IDA. They discuss it and they say, no, we're not going to do it. Which, they make a lot of the IDAs make money on the financing they provide. So this guy was absolutely shocked that he was rejected. And they said, well, why did you reject this? They said, because we're looking for high-tech development. This is not high-tech development. If you can somehow make this into a high-tech project, we'll be happy to talk about it. The developer went to the director of the IDA and said, well, what can I do? And they said, well, we're working on an open access fiber optic ring for the county. We're about $500,000 short. If you can make, as part of your project, a donation to complete the fiber optic ring, maybe they'll look at it differently. And so that's what happened. And it's because it was in their DNA about what this plan was about. And that's what, I'd like, it's a slightly different thing, but having done a number of comprehensive plans, that some have worked and some have sort of languished, the extent to which I can lock in that everybody gets what this means is something that I'm shooting for, because that makes it live. And so that's what this is an attempt to do. And this is a good discussion because I'm getting a sense of what some of the concerns are. Because the idea isn't to just bring out the torches and pitchforks. That's not what I'm trying to do with this.
It's
But
aligning.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
trying to say, oh yeah, okay, yep, we're with that. But what about, okay, I'm with that. And so there's at least a majority of the people that understand this is what the Village of Warwick stands for. That, to me, that would be a strong outcome.
I wonder if the thing that isn't striking us is this, the page with these pictures is really about development, and we've talked about the fact that we're developed.
Right.
So most of the vision isn't really about development. It's
Yes, and this is in the this is in the context of dealing with, well, how do we get public involvement in development options? That's what started me thinking about this.
Yeah, because we were talking about going back. We were talking about how to manage this friction that we have when we have these these new subdivisions and stuff like that, which at some point we will,
Yeah.
you know, we're not gonna not ever, we will potentially be annexing and things like
Right.
that. And so this was born out of that conversation where we were talking about the healthy tension between the need for people to be engaged and also not to just like,
Right.
you know,
Bring the
like
pitchforks.
violate the rights of a developer.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a good example from a community I know very well, about 20 to 30 years ago, there was a proposal in this community for a Walmart in a property that was zoned commercial. So it was an appropriate use. The community went crazy, you know, they brought in lawyers, they beat up Walmart, they eventually said, this is getting too expensive for us. They withdrew their project. Nobody ever changed the zoning. 5 years later, another developer comes in with a commercial project. I think this was a Lowe's. And
So they never had their comp plan, they like never had that alignment.
no, and it was seen as a victory at the time, but it was just like a tremendous waste of resources on the part of the developer and the community, because they never understood that, you know, you've got to have this alignment. If you don't want that, then your zoning should say it's residential or whatever. And part of what the master plan can do is to get people thinking about, what do we want? And, you know, it's, in some ways, it's the most contentious question you can ask, but if you can get that answer right, it works. Then you've got a comprehensive plan that serves the community.
How do you know you've gotten the right answer
If,
for the community at large?
if the community likes it, it's the right answer.
Well, but are you only dealing with a segment of the community that isn't representing the whole?
That's why we're talking about doing a mailer and also revisiting it and
Yeah.
like having a periodic revisitation.
Right, see, I mean, that's the idea, is, because that's the question, is who is the community? And for the reality of it in our system is the community is whoever shows up that day.
They're the participants.
Yeah.
I mean, there are non-participant residents and there are participants, and there's usually a lot more non-participants than there are participants.
Right,
The old silent majority
Right.
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 that
I'm still
you don't hear from.
Sorry, I'm still struggling with how do you boil down something that's already really compressed to even more compressed
Yeah.
to 2 pages to say, did we get this right?
Yeah, that's why I was
It
saying we
doesn't-
should invite them to review the executive summary on the website or invite them to a public hearing.
If it is a mailer, which people tend to get, again, doesn't always lead to responses like we saw at the survey. We have a
Right.
pretty good response rate. But we could do an executive summary, right, with, you know, a link, QR code to the draft or the final comp plan. I don't think we need to put that as a stop in the way of completing the comprehensive plan.
No,
More, hey, we've heard you, we did a survey, we talked to like a dozen different, through a dozen different forums, right, a lot of it in person. We've captured data, everything's been documented on the site, we've hired these consultants, right, here's what we came to. Give it a read, we encourage you to give it a read. Share feedback, just more,
Right.
we heard you, this is what happened.
We could even print up a few copies and put them like in random places, like at the library, not random, but you know, at the library, at
Easter eggs around town.
Newhart's. I'm sorry.
Like Easter eggs around town.
Yeah.
See if you can find it.
No,
yeah, no, I
that
think,
wouldn't be very costly, you know, like
right,
But
12 copies.
I- it still comes down to, in the end, someone wanting to do something. And it may be consistent with the master plan, comprehensive master plan. And at the same time, at that point in time, 3 years after the master plan, 5 years after the master plan, the pushback is unbelievable, unexpected and unbelievable. But that doesn't mean we got that part of the master plan wrong, I don't
Right.
think.
Well, see, right, I think it suddenly is much easier to say, you're being arbitrary about this. Because this is in the master plan, this is consistent with the master plan, the zoning is an outgrowth of the master plan, and now you're saying you don't want this, because all along, this is what the body politics has said they wanted. And if this is done right, there'll be a lot of people in the community that will recognize that and say, yeah, this is right, this is what we wanted. And so that those 50 people, 50 angry people that show up, it would be a different discussion then, as
The
opposed
ultimate
to,
success or failure of the plan is gonna be known in the future when you start implementing some
Yeah.
of the proposals. And then you're gonna find out. It's pretty hard to know before you do it. You've got a majority of the people, or the majority of the responses, we think we put together a comprehensive plan, but until you actually start doing things, you will not find out, really.
Yeah.
And there's only certain amount of people that are gonna provide the input. I don't know how many surveys you wanna send out, but you're only gonna get so many responses back.
Well,
Yeah.
you reduce risk by having an inclusive process.
Right.
And I think that's what we've done, like with the reaching out directly to the various groups. I think this is taking, like, that's that last piece where it's like, okay, this is what we heard. You know, did we get it right?
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And I guess,
I was gonna say, an example, a couple meetings ago, we passed out a plan that had been worked up 5 years ago, the pictures of what the intersection would look like between Kings Highway. I brought that to the Historical Society as an example of a group of people. This is wonderful, holy cow, we didn't know this existed, you know. And Bo knows it exists, I'm sure, because it affects his property, but this is the kind of, wow, you know, we would be in favor of that. Yeah, there are some issues there as how this might look, but, and we know there's a financial, of course, I brought that up, you know, as Barry pointed out, that there's a big water pipe under there that would have to be moved, and it's gonna be, but it really generated about 20 minutes of discussion just on that, and they didn't even know it existed. It had been there for 5 years. So anyway, just for-
yeah, because we're going to do the comprehensive plan and an executive summary. But again, maybe I'll just ask for permission to try to work something up like this. And, if at the end of the day, everybody hates it, we'll throw it out. Or maybe when the executive summary is done, it can be done in a way that makes this unnecessary.
Well, how much did it cost for us to do the initial postcards? Is that?
First time or second time?
If we did it right the first time.
It was practice. You're allowed to practice.
It's about $500, $600?
'Cause I really love the idea of closing the loop on that. Because,
Just to-
generally you
just to send it
shouldn't
out, it was.
ever just do the same,
That much.
like one thing one time.
Probably.
You,
It was over $1,000, I think.
Yeah.
I could find out too.
Yeah, and it could be just a postcard with a QR code.
yeah,
Just
that's
saying.
what
With
I,
some,
and with something like this on one
yeah,
side.
yeah.
Well, one thing, if you implement a project down the line, you've done this, and we've tried to do this, and then people still complain, well, look, back then, we not only gave you the plan, we gave you this, and, it gives you more fuel and a
This went to your house,
Right.
Right,
like,
Yeah. Because that's, having been involved in these issues for my adult life, which is, that's 40 years of adult life or more. That's the thing that I'm really want this to do is to the extent it's possible, and there may not be much possibility, to help inform the way people think of the possibilities for the community, so that they're not surprised if somebody says, oh yeah, that certainly makes sense. Or if there's a real stinker of a project, to be able to say, gee, that doesn't, the design doesn't seem to work at all. There are a lot of comprehensive plans that sort of avoid boiling things down because you have to make choices. And nobody likes making choices. But I think it's a worthwhile exercise to see if we can do that. Because if we can identify, here are the choices that this plan makes, in a way that's not going to just bring out the pitchfork and torches crowd, but, engage people, I think that could be an important step. So what I'd like to do is just take a shot at that and just share it, and we'll see if it works. See if we can get this thing to stick.
It occurred to me that maybe the feedback isn't really what we want. I mean, not that we don't want feedback,
Right.
but we think we did a pretty good job of listening. We think we got this right. So the did we get this right question isn't really, that's not the question that we need the answer to. It's about influencing awareness so that those future discussions have a sense of, already have a grounding in, people kind of know this is out there. You know, I lived in this village for a long time before I ever knew there was a comprehensive plan at all. So, you know, maybe it's just the,
Right, raising,
this exists, and maybe Carly's point about the postcard, a lot of people noticed that, and that we had the posters up, and that was a good campaign, I think. But to hit that again, as you say, it's like, oh yeah, there was this thing, and now here's the follow-up, helps give us that awareness. And, you know, maybe if we can, if we get the right thing on whatever that prompt is, look at this, respond if you feel like it, but that's not really what this is for. It's about how many eyes can we get on it to really, to know that it's out there. And then when we do the launch, that's sort of
right,
a repetitive,
When people ask what's gonna be addressed, okay, it's in the plan, who's addressing it, when's this gonna be addressed? You know, those are the kind of follow-up questions you get, you know, and I get anyway,
Yeah.
to talk to people.
and, you know, the other thing, I don't think this plan is that way, but I've seen so many plans in the past, especially in the Hudson Valley, when asked about, well, what's the essential element of this plan? Well, it's gonna preserve the rural character of the community. You know, yeah, so what does that mean? And, you know, that's when the fighting starts. And the extent to which we can be as from my perspective, to be as specific about it, what is the character that we're trying to foster and promote here? Then, and I think it's, I'm guessing that it's not going to be a mystery to a lot of people, that they're going to recognize and go, oh yeah, okay, yeah, that,
Well, there has to be growth.
yeah,
I mean, in some way, shape, or form, or it'll just die, or you'll tear
Yeah.
down the village and build a new, more modern village or something, but, you know, it has to be growth.
yeah,
I really like your missing middle concept because I think going back to these healthy tensions, I think, you know, the concern about what affordable housing means, you know, versus increasing affordability. I think that's an example of something that I think our hypothesis is that this could help resolve that
yeah.
healthy tension,
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah, I mean, the affordable housing thing, I was once in a community where it was proposed, and they said, well, if we have affordable housing, there are gonna be people getting off in town here, getting off a bus and just going right there. And, you know, what I didn't ask them, but I wanted to, is, well, what do those people look like? Because to me, the implicit message there was pretty strong. And I think this is a way of, you know, letting people know this is about increasing the opportunity for people to live here, you know, regardless of who they are or, you know.
Well, it's funny, I've been in the village in almost 50 years, and I've seen all the developments go out, a lot of good friends have built all the homes out and around Warwick. And now, all the people around my age say, well, we like to downsize, right?
Where are we gonna go to do
Let
Yeah.
the younger couples coming by our nice big house, we just like to have a condo or an apartment somewhere, we could stay close to the village. And there are none, or very little, let's put it that way. So but that's a trend that has occurred in the 50 years that I've been here. So, you know, those are things that we're trying to look into the future to see what we might be able to forecast
Yeah.
and implement.
Yeah, and you know, when the last comprehensive plan was done, when you ask people about, well, what does paradise look like? It's, you know, a 5,000 foot house on 5 acres. And for a lot of people now, that's not paradise anymore. It's like, I need to be able to walk to somewhere, I need to have a community. So part of this is
I don't want to lawn to mow.
yeah, yeah. That's the
And
thing
know
I
my
didn't
neighbors.
do because of this meeting tonight. It's tough. The New Paltz is trying to do this don't mow in May thing for wildflowers and you know, pollinators. And I get that, but I have cylinder mower, it's not a motorized mower, it's just a push mower. And if that grass gets longer than like 4 inches, it's really difficult. And it just looks horrible. So I'm suffering right now because I would like to do the right thing in terms of pollinators. But man, if I don't take care of it soon, it's going to look awful all summer.
Replace your lawn.
Yeah. Well, it's not monoculture. My lawn is not a monoculture. There's a lot of variety in there, which is the problem when you let it grow. All right. So, any other items to bring before this group? Because again, I think we're at the point now where I'm going to put together a draft. Yes.
Were we gonna talk about
Oh,
climate
yeah,
smart
climate smart,
communities
I'm sorry.
and the resilience and sustainability?
Yes, sorry. Thank you. So the Climate Smart Communities Program, you'll see that there's a table here that talks about that. What I did is went through what are the elements that should be in a comprehensive plan for that program. Because the way it works is you get points for including various things. So these are the elements.
Can I help put it into context,
Yeah.
maybe?
Yeah.
So, one of the things we'd like to accomplish is to participate in the Climate Smart Community Program. Essentially what it is it is a point-based system, so you can become bronze certified with 120 points, silver certified above that. Right now in Orange County, only Orange County is bronze certified, no other town or village is. If you look across the river, Beacon is already silver, there's several other towns in the area, so it's gaining some traction, but essentially the whole idea is you complete these series of high impact actions, and along the way, some of these actions will, they call crosswalk with the certified, what's the word I'm looking for, the clean energy communities, right, which we are a designated clean energy community as well. But the whole idea is, as you complete some of these actions, you become available for more grants.
Right.
So the more we do, the more money we are potentially able to receive to keep doing more, right? So they are essentially incentivizing municipalities to take some of these steps and giving them money that we can use for some stuff with infrastructure, right? And overall things that would better the village, right? So I think the fact that we are looking at the comp plan right now is very, very timely, right, to incorporate some of this, so that when we pursue some of these actions, we can point back to the comprehensive plan and say, this is all part of the vision here.
Yeah, and so what I've done is, there are elements that are either required or encouraged in comprehensive plans that are listed in this table. And I went through and said, all right, based on the recommendations that have been put together so far, how have we done? And so there's the element in column 1, possible points in column 2, the status in the plan. It's either included or there's a question mark. Because there's a lot of ways, in terms of overall principles, I think we're there in almost every case. But
I completely agree, and I don't think you need the ones with those, maybe not all of them. The point is to capture the majority of this, because earning these points, some of it's in how we apply and how we prove to NYSERDA that here's what we undertook. We just need this to be captured in the plan.
But these are also good, I liked your additions.
Okay.
The only one it seemed like you didn't actually add was the conserve natural areas one.
yeah, I guess I'll,
Including strategies to designate open space and protect it from development. So I'm assuming that means that we would have to develop criteria too.
right. And the other thing is,
That's a really important one, I think.
yeah, but it also seems to me that's something that's best done in cooperation with the town. Because, as we've talked about, the village is pretty much built out. There's the parks, there's a wonderful park system here, but, other opportunities for natural areas are limited.
But conserve natural areas doesn't necessarily mean extend them.
Okay, yeah, true.
Yeah.
I mean, the park system, I think, is exactly the point
Okay,
of conserve natural areas, right?
Mhm.
So
20-some acres of that, and this kind of coincides with we're looking at revisiting the parks plan.
Yeah.
Oh.
We're gonna do a series of listening sessions on our parks
All right.
coming up in May, and maybe leaking into
So there's gonna be a revisit of the parks plan.
For Memorial.
from Memorial Park.
Okay.
But we're gonna do listening. We're gonna host listening sessions anyway because we have a new Parks and Rec liaison that needs to know.
Okay.
And Peter, part of this is, we look at the areas directly outside of the village, which are, I think, on a lot of people's minds, in that, are they going to be a potential annexation? And if so, right, are they gonna be protected green space, whether it's through PDR or something, right? Is the village in position to purchase some of these lands so that it can be forever protected, right? So verbiage like this, alluding to conservation of natural areas, is a bit broad, but I think captures some of, what we've heard, right?
I do think it would be good to say cooperate with the town also for that, like you mentioned, because we are set within this broader context, and what happens immediately adjacent to the village affects the character of the village.
I've heard multiple people concerned about the 70+ acres directly across the village line, which are for sale.
Ball Farm,
That would be a perfect annexation for middle housing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
or for conservation.
Or both.
Or
I mean,
both.
you could do both with that much land and high density development portion of it. All right, so let me put together a recommendation that talks about, in cooperation with the town, preserving or conserving natural areas. I think in the context of both parks planning and annexation, to make it clear that those are the two things for the village to focus on, because then it makes it clear, it sort of roots it in what issues are likely to be engaged if you start looking at these things.
Well, and recognizing that we're a part of the town.
Mm-hmm.
So not just in terms of the parks plan and annexation, but also with like this broader relational context.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Good, so I will do that. And you can see also, and this one I managed to highlight it in yellow, I've added recommendations to the resilience and sustainability recommendations to sort of check more of the boxes off. Including the first one is conduct a climate vulnerability assessment. The plan isn't going to do it, but there's a recommendation to do it in the plan.
And some of this might be, I'm just thinking out loud here, because I've been working on an all climate hazards related assessment, and one of the big things that's been coming up is vector-borne illness and ticks and things like that, which are a big issue within, and creating recommendations for properties in order to mitigate the risk of tick infestation. Like a simple thing, like certain landscaping that you can do to mitigate the risk.
And then on the last page there, you can see there are basically 3 items. One, seeking to minimize the production of solid waste through policies and educational efforts. Then objectives, promoting the development of or conservation of local food systems. That was a little tough to come up with, but I think we've got that. And then the last one is, the last one should have been
You
eliminated.
had indicated,
Yeah,
yeah.
It's already in I added it
Yeah.
above and forgot to delete it.
With local food systems too, I think that this has to do with this other dimension of community resilience and capacity building, like on our own properties and food sharing, and there's, I don't know, maybe this is comprehensive plan, maybe this isn't, but that's another dimension to this, I think. It's not just an enterprise.
Okay. Enterprises and activities?
It's like the concept of like urban, not urban, on your own property, maximizing community gardens,
Mhm.
things like that outside
But
of.
no chickens.
I know this is something I want to look at.
Is that, are you guys,
It's been in the code for a long time.
no chickens?
No chickens.
Right now.
New Paltz has allowed chickens. Big mistake, just speaking
There you
personally.
go. Well, that's interesting.
Why is it a big mistake?
Noise, dirt, rodents. The rats have got to eat too. So anyway, this is just one person's experience.
It's okay until your neighbor wants to do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, we went through that probably 5 years ago or so, 5, 6, maybe 7
Yeah, that's
years
about
ago.
when this, we,
Yeah, we had somebody from Cornell Cooperative Extension here telling us all the great things about, having chickens and eggs and the whole bit.
yeah, there was a reason they were outlawed, is the way, they were outlawed at some point in the village, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah, it's the fact that, your next door neighbor's got chickens, got a mess, got a smell, they're dragging this coop around, the coyotes are coming into the neighborhood,
Yeah.
all sorts,
Well, we don't-
sorts of things.
We don't need to get into that tonight. So I think I've got the direction I need to move towards a draft, which is pretty exciting, because I feel pretty good about this coming together. I hope we can do it in a way that works for folks.
What's next?
The next is a meeting in May, late May, where I'm gonna try to have a draft ready, and even if it's not completely done, the skeleton will be there largely filled in. There may be a couple of things still missing, but I'm gonna shoot to get the whole thing done, or at least the first version of it.
So it should probably be the 23rd as opposed to the 30th, because the 30th is Memorial Day. And our meetings are gonna be the 2nd and the 16th, so.
I agree with the 23rd.
Okay,
6 PM again?
how's that work for people?
I
It's
don't
good
know.
for me.
Obviously, it worked for the
It'll be all
The
right.
people that are here.
6 of us that
All-
are here. I
all
don't know about
opposed?
the rest, but.
It should work. Yeah.
What's the next topic, Peter?
The next topic is review of the plan,
Oh,
The
it's
draft.
The draft, okay.
draft.
Working backwards from there, when do you anticipate having a draft?
I'm gonna try to get it the week before, we're meeting the 23rd, at the latest, 20th. To get,
20th?
to email copies to folks, right? That's
So
like the
20th
Friday.
would be
That's
Friday.
not a lot of time for people to review it, because
Yeah.
this is gonna be a lengthy draft.
Yeah, but, we could,
Or, I mean, do we push it to?
It would
Well,
have
the
to be
thing is-
June 13th.
it's not good, this isn't gonna be a one-meeting
Tuesday
deal,
the 31st.
I think.
Or Tuesday, yeah.
Yeah, I would see this as being several meetings to get through the draft. Unless.
Oh, okay.
And in that context, later is better for me. Like if sometime in June would be better than the 23rd, because I'll have more time to get more done.
I just wrote it in pen though.
All right, well, never
What
mind.
about-
Someone grab some weight out for her.
June 13th is good for me too, though.
What about Tuesday the 31st?
Yeah, that works for me.
And if you could still get it to us, by the 20th.
Yeah, and again, we'll get through whatever we can get through that meeting. All right, so let me,
I think
so,
I'll golf that night, but
No, Tuesday's your golf
well,
league?
that's usually when they do it, right?
Yeah.
Well,
Well, let's do it on the golf course. Does it
well, they start early.
first?
Yeah, that's it.
Would it help if we pushed it off a little later for that?
June 13th?
No,
No, time
Seven
wise in
PM.
terms of
Oh.
golf.
Is that what, is this the golf league you're talking about?
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm not in that, so I'm afraid. I think they start at like 5 o'clock, so you're not done till.
well,
Yeah.
you can start as early as 4, depending on who
Right.
you're playing with.
Right,
Yeah.
and you
That's
gotta
it.
work that out.
Yeah,
No,
I wouldn't worry about it.
Let's leave it at 6.
Yeah,
then.
leave it at 6.
Leave it at 6 on the 24th?
31st.
I can get
31st, I'm
subs
sorry.
too. We have subs, so it's not a,
Oh. It's not around.
Wait a minute.
Not writing any.
31st at 6. Let's see what that says.
And the draft could still be by the 20th.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna, that's what, you're gonna get some version of the draft by the 20th. And again, it may not have everything, but it'll start to, you'll start to see how the pieces fit together. Or not, but hopefully they'll fit.
You've done a
Does
really
anyone
great job
oppose
of
the
listening to us.
Well, that's what I'm supposed to do.
It is, but, thank you very much.
So anyone opposed to 7 o'clock on the 31st?
I'm sorry, what?
Is anyone opposed to 7 o'clock instead of 6 o'clock on the 31st?
Doesn't matter.
Might give you more time, it would work better for me, but
7 o'clock then?
is that okay with
Everybody else all right?
Yeah.
So the homework will be to make sure we read the
Right.
draft in full prior with notes.
Well, and it has been gratifying to, at every meeting, people have clearly read whatever it is I sent ahead of time. And that's always nice to.
make copies.
Sometimes I read it and then it's been, because I'll read it right when I get it and then I
Yeah, you gotta.
have to
really-
refresh when I.
Okay, so we're all set for the 31st. I'm gonna turn off the recording now.
All right.
Meeting adjourned.